Okay, I think I've started now. I had my last video I uploaded. I had my mic all set up and everything, but it wasn't connected, and then the whole thing ended up getting recorded on the phone audio, which was I'm sure is like nice and echoey for everybody. So what do I want to talk about tonight? There's subjects stacking up here. I guess I'll talk about this run of Robert Heinlein novels I've been reading, which came out of my reading of the book Astounding by Alec Navala Lee. It was a history of Astounding magazine, which later changed its name to Analog Magazine, which it is still published under today. It is where many of your favorite writers got their start. What it is, it's a combo biography of Campbell, John W. Campbell, the author of Who Goes There, but also for the history of science fiction, more importantly, the editor of this magazine for decades. He developed many writers and also cultivated others that were already famous for doing other things. This one it has many biographies of Asimov, Heinlein, L. Ron Hubbard, and Campbell himself, as well as the history of the magazine. It's really fascinating if you're interested in science fiction out of that era and the way that Campbell, uh, some would say he stewarded it, and some would say he warped it. You just got to read it. There's a lot of stuff in there about Scientology, not as much as a full book on Scientology or whatever. And there's a lot on Heinlein, who was Asimov was just a kid when he started writing for Astounding, and so Campbell really nurtured him and mentored him. Heinlein was already an adult. I think he was in his late 30s before he started publishing science fiction for a living. L. Ron Hubbard came from the other pulp magazines. He was able, uh, I don't know if people know much about his history before Scientology, but he was like the hack to end all hacks, or I guess you would say like the working class writer. He could write anything, and so he started writing for Astounding because uh, he was able to write any kind of fiction at all, and he moved into science fiction after being a big hit in westerns and everything else. Um, so this and the book discusses all their careers, and that got me kind of interested in Heinlein, which I've read here and there. I read a lot of Heinlein fiction, short fiction. I would say I read most of his great stuff. I'm talking about the past that he wrote during the Astounding era. Um, but then I became interested in the stuff he wrote later, and this book, this Astounding biography, talks about his book "Have Spacesuit Will Travel." So I thought, oh, why don't I read that? I never read any of his juveniles. They weren't really my thing when I was a kid. I read, I think, one of them. Uh, but I liked Have Spacesuit Will Travel quite a bit. It's a fun book. I think kids would still like it today. It's an adventure story. It's got a typical um, Heinleinian hero in the father of the kid. I don't remember all these names because it's been so long since I read all these now. There's a kid. He's high school age. He's a gifted kid, like most kids in Heinlein are, who gets the idea to. I'm trying to pull up these pictures. Who gets the idea to? Oh my goodness, there's not opening. He wants to go to the moon. Uh, these are not part of Heinlein's world future history. The ones I'm going to talk about today, most of them. So here it was originally published as a serial in fantasy and science fiction. Have Space Will Travel. He during the war, Heinlein had worked on I think diving suits or something, scuba gear, that kind of thing, in his capacity in the War Department or wherever he was stationed. I'm sorry, he was in the Navy, um, and so he had done a lot. So he was interested in spacesuits and the theory. This was written in when would this have been? The early 50s. Look at every time you look at cover of fantasy and science fiction from these eras. You see incredible names on the covers. Imagine that you get part of a Heinlein novel, a C.S. Forester story, probably a reprint, I'm guessing, probably a fantasy story. I don't know if he wrote any science fiction, and then a Richard Matheson story. I should have looked up what those were, but I didn't. So anyway, and then it was published in book form. It's one of the later Heinlein juveniles, which he wrote principally in the 50s, I believe. It kind of came to an end in a few years that we'll talk about soon because I read that one too. But anyway, the kid wants to go to the moon. He tells his dad he wants to go to the moon, and the dad goes, "Okay, we'll figure it out." His dad is very much the kind of character you'll meet in science fiction. I mean, in Heinlein science fiction, or in Heinlein's fiction, where he's a very libertarian, bootstraps kind of guy. They have in this family. The father keeps all the family money in a basket, and if there's money in the basket, and then there's another smaller basket for taxes, because he likes to pay his taxes in cash to antagonize the government. Um, so if there's money in there for stuff, you can take it. If he says you can take it, and of course there's not enough money for a trip to the moon, because really hasn't been a thing. This is quite early. This is the world of this novel set is quite early in human space exploration. So he goes into the very convoluted way of trying to get a moon ticket, trying to get the money. He joins this contest. For a soap jingle or something, and he writes about, I believe he writes 5,000 jingles. He enters it 5,000 times. The kid does, only to find out that he has the winning jingle, but it turns out there was another person with the identical jingle, which happens in contests all the time, those old kind of contests, who had an earlier postmarket. So he loses on that, but the publicity allows him to get a spacesuit. Somebody gives him a secondhand spacesuit, and there's a lot of stuff in the book about the engineering, the mechanics, the figuring out of the spacesuit, the design of the spacesuit, and which was all pretty enjoyable to read, frankly. Anyway, he eventually gets on his way to the moon, or on his way to orbit, and he gets kidnapped by an alien who's also taking another human hostage, a young girl. I think he's about 15, probably. They usually are in these stories, and the girl is about 11. She's a quirky character. She's also a super genius, also happens to be the daughter of another super genius. The aliens were trying to capture the geniuses. I don't want to go through the whole plot, but it was enjoyable enough. And you see, as you do in most of these Heinlein stories I read, that the same kind of same kind of ideas played out: rugged individualism and ingenuity, and plucky young heroines, and things like that. So I like that enough, even though it's a kid's book. It's a middle grade book, I think they used to call them, for junior high school level kids. And I really enjoyed reading it. It ends up in a different place. It's kind of a judgment of humanity story, which were quite common at that time, around the beginning of the nuclear age. These aliens, some of the aliens they're taken to want to judge whether humanity has the right to live or not. So very timely, since Begonia is in the news. The movie, the Emma Thompson. Oh, anyway, forget it. Okay, so I read that. Then I decided I'd go back and read a couple earlier Heinlein books I didn't think I had read. One was The Unpleasant Profession of Johnathan Hoag. And I haven't got all their. Okay, I just picked a random one of each. This is a novella. It's, I think, I think it was also, there's a collection named this with other stories after the novella. It's a fantasy story. I really liked some of the imagery and some of the ideas in this a lot. It's a guy Johnathan Hoag wakes up, doesn't know where he's been, realizes there are a lot of gaps in his memory, strange things going on. He's got rust or something under his nails, which he fears is blood. We're in his point of view quite a while. Then it switches to another point of view of this team of husband and wife team of private detectives, and they get involved in the mystery. There's a lot of sort of parallel universe things going on, and I liked it a lot. It's more like the earlier Robert Heinlein that I've read before. It doesn't have really the kind of dynamic or the politics of libertarianism and the type of characters that we'll talk about in a minute when I get to one of the others. Then I read The Puppet Masters, also from the early 50s, which I thought I'd read before, but I did not. It's a kind of a Invasion of the Body Snatchers kind of story where these alien parasites attach themselves to people. It's quite different in that it's set post World War III, although the Earth is not destroyed, similar to other novels where Heinlein and Philip K. Dick does this too, where it's post World War III, but everything kind of goes back to the same order, more or less. Like, for example, they've rebuilt most of the cities in Puppet Masters. The city, Manhattan is a crater, but they're all in Washington. The majority of the beginning, at least, takes place around Washington, D.C. It's the main characters are these members of this elite kind of spy organization that handles off the grid kind of thing. So it's got that espionage kind of element, although very quickly the puppet master plot is exposed relatively quickly. It's different than the typical formula mind parasite kind of books where no one knows what's going on until the very end, except for one person. Most people know what's going on. The human race tries to adapt to it, and they go on fighting. There's a cover for it. There's an early one. The scenes where the mind parasites take over a person, they take over the lead character actually fairly early on in the book, and then he gets freed and has to go back, are really chilling. The description of the person under the spell of these parasites, which are like this big or something, and they attach on your spine, which are a very malevolent race from another planet, nearby planet, actually, as it turns out, is very unnerving. Some of his best writing, I think, is in those scenes where this guy is being taken over and the things he's forced to do, kill people, capture people to make them also take them over and things like that. It's kind of it's coming back in now with Pluribus. Kind of a similar kind of theory about a mind virus, although these are bigger than that. And let's see what was next then. So then I tried to go in order. I skipped his next book that he wrote after How Space You Travel would have been Starship Troopers. I read that before, so I skipped it. And the next one after that is a book that I guess everybody talks about. I don't know how many people still read it. And that is Strangers in a Strange Land. Okay, I paused so I could look this up. I wanted to look up the name of a character in Stranger in a Strange Land. Not the main character, but the character I'm probably going to end up talking more about the most. But this book was published in 1961, won the Hugo Award for Best Novel in 1962. Became the first science fiction novel to enter the New York Times Book Review bestsellers list, and in 2012, Library of Congress named it as one of 88 books that shaped America. Well, that's quite a pedigree, right? From a guy who's writing Have Spacesuit Will Travel and about mind parasites and about space marines and stuff like that, and then this comes out, and I don't know if he intended for this book. I don't know what they thought at the time of whether this was going to be such a big book that really crossed them over to a different kind of level. And I know that a lot of people who read this book used to be very popular in the 60s with hippies and stuff. It was probably a big influence on the counterculture of the time. I have no idea because I haven't researched it into what Heinlein thought of that. Heinlein has very peculiar politics. They don't fit into a left right dynamic. And really, let's be honest, most people's do not. But his are really very unique to him, I think. And this is where sexuality starts to come more into his books overtly. Um, it is the story of Valentine Michael Smith, who is a human being raised on Mars by Martians, and the Martians are not humanoid at all. What happens is there was a Mars colony that goes, in the past, and then were wrecked and were unable to return. They eventually all died, but before they died, two of their astronauts had a baby together, and the baby survived. So it's a human baby being raised with the philosophy and worldview of these Martians, which is very non-human, and frankly, it gets a little irritating to me as the book goes on. Anyway, the government tries to keep him. Uh, Fairly quickly, though, some people take pity on him, and a nurse and a tabloid reporter, they take him to a person named Jubal Smith. No, not Jubal Smith. What's his name? Jubal Harshaw, who's the prototypical, the typical, the 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 essence of this kind of older, competent, sarcastic, independent, extremely competent, I should say, superhuman kind of man that is one of um, Heinlein's favorite characters, and probably based on probably an idealized version of himself, like like Jack Reacher is an idealized version of Lee Child. According to Lee Child, he said that. Anyway, so he's a lawyer, he's a doctor, he's wealthy. He lives in a compound with a swimming pool. Swimming pool plays a lot into the book. You see it on the covers of the books all the time. He is also a popular writer of trash magazine fiction, which I think is where he just, and he's got like 12 mermaid girls around, not mermaids. Um, it's just got girls that hang around. There's like 20 girls that hang around at the pool all the time. I know I said 20. I think it's like six, but he'll call one to the front every so often, and he'll dictate a romance story to them. And he has total contempt for the stories that he writes and publishes, and they'll just type it out in like 10 minutes, send it off, and make $1,000 or whatever. Uh, this is set in the future though, where there is a different. Um, is this post World War II too? I mean, there's futuristic elements all over, which I actually didn't realize since I never read this book. I thought it was just across for near future, but there are a lot of changes to society that have happened in here. Particularly one that there's a strange sort of post-Christian church that has taken over, like sort of a I want to see if I can find the name of that church. Just a strange church, like halfway between a new cult, and I can't help but wondering with the Church of All Worlds it was called. Oh no, no, sorry. That is Valentine Michael Smith's church he does later. But there's an existing church which is not like contemporary Christianity, but as more or less like a cult that's taken over. Oh, the Church of the New Revelation, the Fosterites, by this guy named Foster. Uh, anyway, I'm getting lost here. There's a lot of. Uh, I'm struggling to figure out why. I guess you'd have to go back to 1961 to figure out what the appeal was. I think it was in the late 60s. There's like things that I guess appealed at the time, like quote unquote free love. Uh, it's all this sort of touchy feely kind of stuff that Valentine Michael Smith got from the Martians. There all this talk about being someone's water brother because on Mars, of course, there's not much water left. So, if you share water with somebody, it's a big deal. And so they're always calling each other water brother and stuff. And the word grok, I guess you've heard. Well, I guess we've all heard now because thanks to how the billionaires that rule over our lives take all these terms from old science fiction books and misapply them, like Palantir or grok. So grok is to understand something, but it's deeper than that. It's like understanding at a different level. It's just all this kind of stuff that really doesn't work that much for me. But it is interesting to get a view of Heinlein's very strange worldview, which I do respect him for because I can't imagine that. I mean, he was doing this because he felt this was what he needed to do, I guess is the way to put it. Anyway, Johnathan Hoag, Jubal Harshaw, rather, makes his book almost palatable for a while because he's got like an acerbic sense of humor and stuff, and he loves running rings around the government, as he represents himself as Valentine Smith's lawyer, and trying to get him his rights and just messing with the government and all that kind of stuff, which is kind of enjoyable. And just being a cranky old man who has 12 bikini clad girls around him at all times, even though he's way beyond sex, he says, because he's old and cantankerous. And anyway, but Johnathan Michael Smith isn't beyond sex, and all the other people just start having, like free love and stuff. And Michael Smith has special powers, like he can sit under the pool. He can lay on the bottom of the pool for a long time without breathing. He can telekinetically move stuff. All these things play into his founding of his own church. I kind of lost more interest as the novel was going along, but I read the whole thing because I just felt like I wanted to see what happens. He kind of goes out in the world with all the other chicks and a couple of the other guys from Jubal Harshaw's compound, and they go around the world. They try different things. He works in a circus for a while. Not a circus, like what would it be, like a traveling uh, carnival show, I guess. Where he does tricks and things. Then he eventually decides to um, start a cult, and they live in a house, and they start um, ordaining people in the cult, and it just kind of went on like that. Probably not the best description of the book, but says he was, huh? Okay, okay. So I did. I guess I can't say I enjoyed it, but I'm glad I read it because for its uh, historical in incidents, it's quite interesting that. And I don't know which one I read. There was because I did the audiobook, I should say, on this one, I think. I don't know. I believe I read the later one. It was cut down, like 40,000 words or so was cut down when it was originally published. and maybe that's why it drags so much. I don't think just sex scenes were cut or anything, because they're not really sex scenes. There's discussions of people having free love and things like that, but it was interesting. It was interesting enough to keep me reading. I was planning to go through every last Heinlein book, and I'll tell you as we get to it why I didn't. But I was reading these more in terms of my interest in the history of science fiction, which obviously Heinlein is a huge part. The next book was called Pot that I read after this. Now this is interesting because if he had known, uh, if he had planned to take his career in a completely different direction with Stranger in a Strange Land, I don't think this would have been his next book, because this is another juvenile. It's called Podkayne of Mars, uh, which is a very strange book, and much more fun to read than Stranger in a Strange Land. To me, it was short. It was another Heinlein. This girl here, I believe, oh, her name is Podkayne. This is her little brother, who's an awful little piece of sociopathic garbage. Anyway, she is about, I think, 14 in the book. It's kind of hard to tell because they go by Martian years. So she's 9 in Martian years, which I thought made her 19 when I read the book. Unfortunately, when I researched later, I was completely wrong, and she's 14, which makes the book a little more disturbing, and her little creepy little brother. Um, anyway, she's the narrator of the book. She lives on Mars. She's from a race called the Marsmen. They call themselves because they distinguish them. They're Earth colonists who've moved to Mars. Earth has colonized the Moon, Mars, and Venus, and so it's a little farther ahead in time than other things I've read here. Because they refer to Martians as the nearly extinct or extinct race of original Martians, and they call themselves the Marsmen. Anyway, her dream is to be a space pilot, and towards that dream, she's very excited at the beginning of the book to be going to Earth on a cruise liner called the Triplanetary, which her family is going to go on. Her brother, and her two parents, who are both, of course, super scientists. Um, and and there's a lot in the first third of the book. It's all very interesting how he builds these worlds. First of the book is about the Mars that these folks live on, and their and uh, and the society's attempts to build the culture. For example, since both Podkayne's parents have a very high IQ, they are required to have, I think it's 7 children total, and but they can space them out. So they have. I thought it was 5. I think they have 5 embryos stored. Then they're gonna have a couple at a time. They have these kids spread out time because it's big drain on their resources and everything, and their work life to have kids, which they don't really want to have. It's just the environment. The government demands it because they're trying to populate Mars anyway. So these are the oldest 2 kids. Podkayne is named after a male hero, a male historical hero of the Marsmen. Anyway, uh, things go wrong. They end up having to gestate all those frozen embryos at one time. So all of a sudden, the parents have 5 infants to take care of, 5 newborns, which means the trip to Earth is off. Uh, However, because of the stress in the family and everything, or at least this is what we believe at this point in the book, her uncle, who was another one of these Heinlein older mentor characters, Cantaker's genius guy, says he'll take Podkayne and her little idiot brother to on the trip, so they can go to Earth, just the 3 of them. And then we go to the ocean liner. It's called Triplanetary because it goes from, I hope I got that right. It was called something like that anyway. because it's a cruise ship that goes. It's designed like a cruise ship. It's very much like a cruise ship. Now that I've been on a cruise ship, I can say that that goes. It makes a route from through the three planets. It goes to uh, makes the trip from Mars to Venus to Earth and back again in that order, or at least it's going in that order this time. Maybe the moon too. So they're very excited to go on there. This little creep starts creating lots of problems. Brings a weapon. Uh, they Podkayne has adventures on the cruise ship, like getting to know the captain, learning how, about space flight and things like that, and getting mentored a little bit, and also, running into an older woman who's kind of a busybody who tries to manipulate her into doing crap for her and stuff. All that's fine. It's kind of like a travelogue stuff. Then they go to Venus, which is a very interesting world. It's kind of a anarcho-capitalist hellscape. It's basically the whole thing's like Las Vegas, and some things in there that really reminded me of the present is, for example, the tag. Once they get off, they decide to go out, and explore the country like you do off of a cruise ship, and they get in this cab and they want to go to this certain casino, and the cab driver's just driving like a maniac, just like 200 miles an hour, and they almost crash everything. And he's throwing in, "Get out, get the pay, get out." And the description later of the cab is why the cabs are like that and drive insane and stuff, because they're basically Ubers. Everybody on this planet, most people who work on this planet are independent contractors. They only get paid for the minutes they're working and everything. It's really kind of a, and most of the revenues from Vice, from gambling and stuff like that, advertising, everything. It really sounds like modern America. Um, then this little creep, and it's like it's so lawless that even this 9-year-old is like when she sees him again, he splits off, of course, from his family, and he turns up again. He's playing blackjack and he's winning, of course, because he's a mathematical genius, and he gets in all kinds of trouble with the mob. Uh, by this point, we're about 2/3 into the novel, which is a novel about a girl's ambitious young girl's dream of being a space pilot and going to Earth for the first time. And you start to get the sense we're not going to get there because there's not enough pages left. I thought, oh, well, maybe this is a trilogy. It looks like it's really probably a trilogy. Like first they go to Venus in this book, and then next book they go to the moon, and then from the moon they go to Earth, or something like that. Anyway, no, turns out things take a very dark turn, like a very dark turn. Not as dark as, well, almost as dark as Heinlein wanted them to. The publisher actually balked at his ending. So he added one sentence to the ending. I'm going to spoil it from here. So it's, he was kind of in this book deconstructing the hero's journey, deconstructing the kind of books he'd been writing for kids. I don't know if he did it out of. I don't think he would have done it out of spite. I think he was just bored with the type of books he was writing. Because not only do they not get to Earth, not only does she not get to be a pilot, she gets killed. And then her little brother finishes the book. She gets killed trying to help an alien species on Venus, trying to go back and rescue it. Turns out her uncle, who seemed like he was very benevolent, is really just using these kids as an excuse to go to Venus, because he's a senator, but he's actually on a secret diplomatic mission, and he wanted to use the kids as cover. The little prick just stays a little prick, and that's how it ends. And the publisher was upset that he killed the main character off screen, pretty much. In fact, even really everything that we read in the first two books is really for nothing, because she just ends up dying in a really kind of irrelevant to her story way, as if it's someone else's story. And so her her chapters are most of the book is her chapters, her memoirs. Then her brother, little creepy brother, comes in and tells the last chapter and about how she died and how their uncle betrayed them, and also the uncle. There's a moment in there where the uncle gets to berate the parents for being very bad influences, for having raised such rotten, careless kids, one of whom is a sociopath and the other who ended up getting herself killed on Mars because of what I think some people would call today suicidal empathy. Um, and that's not a theory I'm familiar with very much, or not, and I don't use it correctly, probably, but I'm not a proponent of that idea of empathy anyway. But I believe it's an accurate description of this book. Anyway, so then Heinlein, because publisher doesn't like these, he said, "Don't let the girl die." So he adds a line or two about saying that the brother is only finishing the book because his sister Podkayne is in the hospital and recovering nicely. And he said, from what I read about this book, he said one of his reasons for writing it was he was tired of the idea that in fiction, in popular fiction, that everything always works out for people and that people's dreams. So it's very much a subversive book, even with that line in there. But it's also a peculiar and off kilter book because it deliberately does not fulfill any of the reader's expectations. You know, the first paragraph is something like, "I always wanted to go to Earth. I always wanted to be a pilot." So you think that's what's going to happen to the main character, but no, she's going to just die as like on a side mission because her uncle used her as bait for sort of a spy thing. Anyway, so what was next then? I've got a bunch of these. I hope you're still listening. I know one person is. Okay. Podkayne of Mars. Okay, now that was, but think about the way I just described it and think of that it's coming after Stranger in a Strange Land. Then the next book that I read by him was Glory Road. This is another deconstructive book. I really think a deconstruction of a trope book or deconstruction of a cliche kind of book. We've got a guy who is a veteran of a South Asian war. It's not really mentioned which one it could be. Vietnam could be. We're in the mid '60s by now, so it probably is Vietnam, or it's meant to be like a future proxy of it. Because in this book, unlike the others, there's really not a lot of far future stuff. It's very much more near future. He's at loose ends. He thinks he wins the lottery. He turns out his tickets are counterfeit. This is a thing that happens in these kind of oddly strange things that happen in Heinlein stories to some of these characters, where they'll get like a wish fulfillment kind of thing, but it will turn out like the character and have space that will travel, where he thought he won a free trip to Moon, he doesn't, and yet the character in Glory Road thinks he wins this. He wins the Irish sweepstakes, I think, but it turns out his tickets are counterfeit when he goes to try and collect. But they don't. Maybe this is his point: is these characters don't give up. Then they kind of double down on on their own future. Anyway, the kid and the young Vietnam vet or Southeast Asian war character, what was his name? Doesn't matter. Answers a weird call to adventure kind of thing, like literally a newspaper ad or a video paper ad or something, saying, "Are you longing for adventure?" and all that. And so he answers it. He meets the most amazing. He answers the ad, which has been placed by the most amazing, beautiful, incredible, gorgeous, uh, imaginable woman in the world, who flirts with him hard, and is definitely in love with him, and kind of like even he finds a bit too much and a bit overly submissive way, and she's got a interesting manservant guy who's kind of a bitchy sort of stereotype of a different kind, and which later turns out to be her son. She's an immortal queen from another dimension, an immortal empress. She's looking for a champion. So this setup has callbacks all the way to Burroughs and before of like the Deja Thoris of Mars, the most beautiful imaginable woman that could ever be, and the Earthman plucked out of into adventure who turns out to be an excellent swordsman for some reason. And I think there's a reason in here why he's so good at swords. So they go through all these dimensions. She has to recover some kind of chalice or thing. I forget what it was. The MacGuffin. They have to get the MacGuffin to rule the empire, which they do after some adventures. And that's the glory road they're following. This glory is to do this, and he goes back with her, and he's the prince now, or the consort, or whatever, and he gets very bored, and it's the point of the book is what happens after the great adventure of youth that happens in books like The Princess of Mars and all that. And after you've got all the glory and you've won the princess and you've restored the sacred chalice or the Horcrux or whatever the fuck it is, and so again, it's another deconstruction. He's really tearing apart these kind of old tropes because he's either trying to push, either he's bored with them or he just wants to uh, say what he has to say. But it's definitely the way his career is going, in my opinion. Now I got to go. I only read one more. Okay, then the next book, and that's not a bad book, but it's a bit slow because the first half is kind of all cliche, and the second half is kind of all just boredom. This come to a pretty interesting conclusion. He kind of works it out in a way by spending some time apart to grow up and have a full life because he is much younger than the queen, princess, empress lady, because she's young and beautiful and perennially, but she has children that are ancient. She's very, very old. Um, so they decided to spend some time apart, and he's going to go live a life on Earth, just having a career or whatever, and then go back. Anyway, then the last one I read, and I think this will be the last one. I was going to keep going, but after this one, it's pretty tough. And it's not that I don't respect him as a writer. I think he's a very interesting writer. He's very much his own person. It's kind of a miracle that all these books are nominated for like every award. They wouldn't often win, but his stature in the field was such that he would just kind of get the kind of like the Jack Nicholson, Meryl Streep thing. Like, well, they're in a movie. I guess we got to nominate him for an Oscar. And late years, I think his books are more and more quirky and more kind of what you want. I mean, like his ideas or not, it's kind of what you read any writer for. At least I do. Is if you're reading any serious writer, it's you want their worldview, which is why continuation novels don't ever really work. Continuation novels like Bob Goldsboro, I think it's Robert Goldsboro who writes new Nero Wolfe novels, or did for a while. They're terrible. They don't sound like the real ones at all. Or people's certain person's brother writing continuation novels, and people say the books just aren't the same. So I think it's really a thing. At least for me, you really want to read the writer, and if it's a writer you like, you want to hear what they're doing, what they want to say. Um, and that brings me to Farnham's Freehold, which is another odd book that I'm almost running out of time, almost running out of is by far the most irritating book since Stranger in a Strange Land. There's this guy named Farnham. He's got a freehold. No, there's this guy named Farnham. He's got an alcoholic wife. He's got a daughter and a son, and they're having dinner one night, and the daughter's friend is over. And I will just tell you that they're both probably about 20. Um, and then so Farnham's this kind of, and again, one of these fathers is like blustery and quick-witted and knows everything, and how to build everything and how to do everything. And they also have a manservant, an African American man who's I think also in his 20s or so, that works for Farnham in the house. Anyway, there's a nuclear war. Boom! The whole little compound they're in, because he's got a shelter, gets sent far into the future. I don't remember how far now, but past the time of the war, and they come out, and they're in kind of a wasteland where, as far as they know, there's no other people. So they start to think about how they're going to rebuild civilization, and mostly comes down to who's going to sleep with Daddy Farman. His wife is alcoholic and useless and drunk. I mean, drunk and really kind of loses her shit. She forgets. She kind of starts losing touch with reality. Uh, here's an opportunity for Heinlein to kind of put in a lot of his social and his thoughts about different social dynamics and stuff. And he's not that bad. There's other characters that are quite bad. This book, maybe some people feel like racial stereotypes and stuff, but for the time, for example, there's one scene, probably the most disgusting scene in the book, that I almost felt like I don't need this shit. But I am trying to take it in the context of this is, as far as I know, there are no people. They have to rebuild civilization this way. His dumb daughter comes to him and asks whether the father, prefers that she marry. She asks him, what's worse, miscegenation or incest? Um, I'm probably pronouncing it wrong, but interracial marriage, thinking of the young black guy who lives with him, or incest, marrying her brother. And I think we all know what the answer is today. She doesn't. Farnham does, and maybe this was forward thinking at the time, but the father says, well, definitely interracial marriage is much preferable to incest. There's nothing wrong with interracial marriage. So he's kind of got progressive views uh, compared to other characters in the book, and also compared to perhaps the times. I don't know. It seems like kind of a no-brainer. It seems like if you were trapped on an island, you would want to avoid incest as much as possible. I think that's the sensible reason today. But then, so none of that stuff's kind of its time. I expected that. It's not really handled in the most sensitive way or whatever. Some people might find it offensive just that it's discussed. They might find it offensive just that there's a black character in the book. I don't, that's discussed in this way or whatever. Then the daughter goes, well, I don't, and so he's like, well, you should definitely marry, I forget the names now. You should definitely marry this guy who's not your brother. And she's like, I don't know. Well, if I had to choose, I wouldn't marry my brother. I'd marry you. I like you much better, my brother. So she goes in this whole thing where she should marry her own father, Mary, and he's like, oh, that's ridiculous. Don't do that. Blah, blah, blah. Which is good. It's pretty disgusting to listen to her go on and on and on about how much she wants to marry her daddy. Anyway, it turns out, and this is excellent luck on everybody's part, that both his daughter, Farnham's daughter, and her friend are both pregnant when the atomic bomb goes off by different people who we think, at least, are outside the family. Well, his daughter is definitely just some guy she met or something. And turns out Farnham is the father of his daughter's friend's children. I think, because I was starting to skim at this point, because it's just so gross. But, again, he set up a situation where these are the only people in the world. And so obviously they're going to be forced into moral situations that we can't think about, and which is an interesting way to go with the novel. Uh, and the family kind of breaks up. The mother and the son go off together because the son's just kind of a really kind of useless reprobate. Nobody's really as competent as Father Farnham. And lo and behold, they find out there. Then they get discovered. There's a whole civilization, and it's a post-apocalypse civilization. So they've got things are more advanced at than us, and some things are not. The white people are now enslaved. It's just like mostly a Muslim uh, empire, I think. Anyway, white people are all enslaved, and so they enslave Farnham and the daughters, and the black servant becomes, they give him a place in society. Farnham also works, because he knows everything and he's super smart and he can figures out the language in like a week and everything. He becomes the best friend of the king or the emperor or whatever he is, and teaching him about the past and stuff. And conveniently, before this, his daughter had died in childbirth with her children. So now he doesn't have to, deal with his daughter wanting to marry him, as long he can just concentrate on his girlfriend and, his 18-year-old girlfriend, and their kids. And she's down in the slave quarters, and they call all the women sluts. Um, and they're property of the state, and they use whips on them and stuff, and they're trying to integrate into this society. And then I really stopped caring. So eventually they get into enough trouble that a miracle of miracles, some of the scientists figure out, well, here's a way we can send you back to where you were, um, and then you can maybe do something. I don't remember what. Um, so the first half is all this weird survivalist stuff about who's gonna bang who in this family unit, and the second is just all this stuff about sort of a future society where that really all becomes irrelevant. All that weird incest stuff in the first part. So, and basically what it reads like is, so the only two people alive. So the former servant, of course, he doesn't want to go back because he's got a good situation in this new society. The the mother, I think she was in a something happened to her. The brother gets lobotomized or something, or castrated or something. So really, the only people left to go back are the dad and the 18-year-old new wife and their two babies. She had twins, of course. Um, and so they go back. They find out that they're in a different. They go back to the same time. They're trying to get a bunch of stuff together so they can hide from the Holocaust. They can be safe during the atomic exchange that they know is about to happen. So they're going to go move up in the hills or whatever. And at some point, they realize that there's subtle changes in the history. Like the girl's car was an automatic in the in her memory, but now it's a stick shift and things like that. So they realize they're not really back in time; they're in a different parallel dimension. So they don't know if they're in the one they left, or if the future that they saw is in their own dimension. And it's all kind of interesting stuff all thrown out there, but it's really very strange kind of structure of this book uh, where it all seems like it's really just kind of a wish fulfillment of this guy. This guy meets, he has dinner with his. You could almost read this as a fantasy of this guy's daughter's friend, 20-year-old daughter's friend, or maybe they might even be younger. I don't want to think about it. Um, Comes over for dinner, and then there's nuclear war, and everybody dies except for the old man and the beautiful friend of the daughter. So it's very convenient for him that his asshole son dies, his alcoholic wife dies. I mean, not dies, but he gets rid of them because now he can live a new life again with this very young girl and their babies. All I can say about this is I looked up and found out after this about Robert Heinlein's private life that he had no children, and I think that's great. I don't know if he would have written the same kind of books if he had no children. I don't have children, so but I'm just glad that he didn't have any children. When you read books like this, it's like, my God, what the hell, dude. So that's really, I'm kind of really fed up with it. There were scenes in that. When I got to that scene about the incest versus interracial marriage scene, I was like, what the fuck is this book? So I'm probably not the audience for it. I don't know if there is an audience for it. I wonder who this spoke to in the mid '60s, enough that it got a probably got a nomination. Let's see what it was nominated for. So his books after this become, according to you know Farnham's Freehold. This is only 1964. His books after this, there's a little gap after this. They're always hitting the bestseller list after this. There's Lazarus Long and the Book of Job, and these kind of really. And I have heard from people that they get further and further self and self-indulgent, and these ones that I read so far are, as far as I want to go with that self-indulgent, I guess, for a while. They really become tedious after a while. His he got to do what he wanted to do. I can see if I find this was nominated for anything. This didn't get really good reviews, it looks like. Oh, gee, this is dopey. The SF site described Farnham Freehold as a difficult book and stated at best it is an uncomfortable book with some good points mixing with the band, like an elderly relative who can give good advice and the next breath go off on some racist or sexist rant. At worst, Farnham Freehold is anti-minority, anti-woman survivalist rant. I don't know if he's that racist as he gets plugged on this. It's the white people are enslaved and oppressed in the future post-apocalypse, and part of the reason is, part of the excuse that society mentions or discusses about is that, well, these people caused the nuclear war. It was between the Soviet powers and the U.S. and Europe, and so these people don't deserve anything but slavery. But I really don't think, I wouldn't say it's anti-minority, because I think the way, at least Farnham's point of view, is that he's not really against these people because they're black and they enslave whites. He's very adaptive to the situation that he's in, and this is the world they live in now, and he attempts to adapt to it. He's not like mad, like, oh, how wrong, you can't enslave white people. There's nothing like that. He's very much a realist. It's just these absurd situations that are put in here. The leader, it's an authoritarian culture that they end themselves up they end up with in this authoritarian culture. But what kind of society is going to survive a nuclear war? It's probably going to be a very authoritarian culture. I've learned from zombie movies. Anyway, so the book Sexism may be a crucial flaw. Yeah, he's got some strange ideas. He's got sex on the brain, that's for sure. But they're not sexy books. There's nothing. It's just the ideas, and I think that's probably enough. I'm just looking to see if it got any nominations for anything, because it's kind of incredible some of these books that were nominated for. Well, I don't see it, and they usually put that kind of stuff in Wikipedia. So maybe got kind of uneven reviews. So it was maybe at the time was even considered a bit backward. Okay, so the New Republic. So SF site thinks it's mostly racist, but the New Republic at the time said while conceding Heinlein's desire to show the evils of ethnic oppression. So the theory there being that he's showing, see, it's wrong to oppress African Americans here in the 1960s, and in the future it will be also wrong to oppress any other group, which just happens to be at this time white people. So he's trying to show, at least if you want to give it the most generous reading, about how unfair it is to suppress any other race. Which is good. That's anti-racist. So anyway, New Republic, while conceding homeless desire shows of ethnic, states that in the process, Heinlein resurrected some of the most horrific racial stereotypes imaginable, ultimately producing an anti-racist novel only a Klansman could love. It is meant to be anti-racist. It's just his handling of everything that is giving people pause, and he's just not up to it. He might have done some research, maybe talked to some people. Anyway, so I guess he wasn't nominated for anything. That's good. So anyway, it was enough. It was enough Heinlein for me. I don't know if I'll go back to any at some other point. These other ones, I'm still in the area where people would generally consider these classic novels. Now the later ones that come in, like Friday and Job and a cat of the cat who could walk through walls, whatever, which is most people consider just like bloated and overindulgent. And so I might be done with Heinlein. What do you think? Anyway, here's a long one for the people who like long ones. I got all that Heinlein out of my system, and I'll be back to reading better stuff. Although there are things to respect about him, that he did his own thing. And that's what a lot of people aren't doing today. A lot of people are writing for, in my opinion, a lot of people, we're in the era where people write to market. Stuff was not written to market. This stuff bothered people. And it bothered them, I think, in a lot of reasons, for the right reasons. Stuff that's being written today is meant to, and granted, I'm not reading a lot of modern fiction, but a lot of it is pandering. What I have read is pandering, and it's is it what people want to write, or is what people think they have to write? I don't know. I'm convinced that there's a lot of stuff going on that people are like doing too much market research, trying to jump on each trend, and for whatever else you can say about him. Heinlein did his own thing. Okay, I will shut up now. That's far too much, and I'll talk to you soon.